Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Sam's Healing Podcast. My name is Sam, and today we are all very fortunate, as usual, to have a returning guest who is actually a fan favorite, if you will, that comes in quite often. Her name is Amanda Asproni. Hi, Amanda. How are you?
Good, thank you.
You are a licensed clinical psychotherapist specializing in infidelity, compulsive sexual behaviors, complex PTSD, and relationships as a whole. You have a thriving practice, and I send people to you all the time. Today, we're going to talk about something that is a little bit of a nuance. But first, I want to ask you kind of a funny question, and that is, why are we in relationships so avoidant? Where does avoidance come from? Why are so many people avoidant?
So, to put it simply, avoidance in relationships comes from an original childhood tear of them that goes back to either relationships with your parents that didn't feel trustworthy, or you could have had great parents, but you had something really traumatic happen in your childhood that maybe you never disclosed to your parents and you kept it to yourself, but it was about a relationship that was significant. Even bullying growing up in elementary school can cause this terror of relationships and a fear of being seen, being known, and then also being safe with people close to you.
So if that's the case, nobody's born avoidant. Is that right? Avoidance is something that is, you and I did a video several years ago. It was quite successful. We had lots of people chime in and talk about it. But is avoidance a maladaptive coping mechanism? Is it a survival tactic?
Right. Mostly, unless you're going to talk about spectrum. So the autism spectrum, that you can be born with an organic temperament more towards avoidance with relationships. But generally speaking, for the non-neurodivergent population, babies come into the world seeking, desperately, shamelessly seeking attachment in relationship.
Okay. So as we move into relationships, I have a great friend, colleague named Tyler Patrick, who comes in. He's talked about avoidance and related very well with the audience. And we didn't talk too much about dismissive avoidant or fearful avoidant. I want to kind of jump into some fearful avoidant stuff. But first, due to the work of some other professionals and social media, dismissive avoidance has become a pretty commonly talked about attachment. Would we call that an attachment style?
It's a dysfunctional attachment style.
Careful. Let's not shame those that are dismissive avoidant. Not that we don't know a couple, but why do we become dismissive avoidant, and what does that look like?
So originally, when attachment theory was first coming onto the scene of psychology, fearful avoidance, which is also called disorganized attachment, was considered the worst of the three. So the three would be dismissive, avoidant, fearful or disorganized, and then anxious. So what we know now is that actually the dismissive avoidant attachment can be the biggest one to tackle. So we know that dismissive avoidance, or someone who has primarily a dismissive avoidant attachment, because really if you're one, disorganized, dismissive, or anxious, you're going to be all three, but you can be a primary. So if you're primarily dismissive avoidant, it's the hardest to break through that protective shell to let the people who love you get close to you. And for the dismissive avoidant, it's very difficult for them to show the people that they love overtly that they really love them.
Okay. Love the verbiage. You talk about the shell. Why do dismissive avoidants have that shell there in place?
Well, because if you grow up and you continuously get bit by a German Shepherd or a pit bull, I mean, wouldn't you be an idiot to just continually see a German Shepherd or a pit bull on the street and just run over to them and think that you're going to pet them and they're going to lick your face and everything's going to go great? That's how it is.
So does that mean that we, I'll say in this regard, does that mean that we Unfaithful, for example, turn everybody into German Shepherds?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If we were bit by a German Shepherd, if you will, to use your analogy. So then we see everybody as a German Shepherd that's just ready to put their claws into us, right?
So it's a severe lack of trust. So the protective mechanism, the way that you first work with dismissive avoidance is to talk about de-shaming it. It was created as a maladaptive coping mechanism. Sometimes you won't even call it maladaptive. It was pretty genius or brilliant. If you grew up in an unsafe environment where the people closest to you, including even if it's the school system, if you grew up in a really rough neighborhood, I mean, you're going to protect yourself so that you don't die. It's brilliant.
Makes great sense. So I love the word de-shaming. I'm taking notes as we talk here, as I always do with people like yourself and so many other great guests who I hope that the listener or the viewer is taking notes as well. So de-shaming it. Okay, now let's talk about the fearful avoidant. So if the dismissive avoidant perceives their betrayed spouse or betrayed partner as a German Shepherd, the fearful avoidant, what does a fearful avoidant look like? Do they have German Shepherds? Do they have poodles? Do they have giant rhinoceroses, rhinoceresi? Maybe I got to look that up later and find out what the right verbiage is. But how does the fearful avoidant, what do they look like and how do we help them?
So the fearful avoidant is still avoidant. Sometimes they can act dismissive. Sometimes they're more covertly dismissive. So a dismissive avoidant is more shameless than a fearful avoidant. They're like, what do you want from me? Right? Like,
okay.
Get away from me. Like, why are you trying to get close to me? Why do you want me to tell you, all these positive affirmations? Like, why do you need that? Ew. They're right.
Or it could be, why do we have to talk about it again? Why do you keep bringing this up? Why can't you move on? So for all the betrayeds out there, male or female, it can look like that. Oh, here we go again, right?
That you don't want to go deep. You want to keep things surface because getting deep and getting real causes massive anxiety, feelings of not being safe. So the dismissive avoidant would be more overt. A fearful avoidant, which remember is also disorganized, they can often be more covert. So they may not slap their partner in the face and say, get away from me, stop trying to get close to me, or stop trying to get into me, but they will pull back in more covert ways. So they can be less offensive. They also, we think, can be braver. So the big difference between a dismissive avoidant and a fearful avoidant is the fearful avoidant does want the relationship. They consciously do know that they want the relationship. What they do, though, is they go in and out. So it's very push-pull. With a dismissive, you're always trying to grab them, you're chasing.
Yeah.
You can't
Come talk to me. Go to therapy, go to a course, read a book, take a test, do this.
They just keep running.
But the fearful avoidant, are they in, out? Are they, I think you said this on another podcast. It was one of the few people that I've ever heard mention it. Now, my good buddy, James Anir, has talked a little bit about it, but you called it moving the target. Is that an accurate depiction? You rolled your eyes, so obviously that probably struck a nerve. Is that what it is, moving the target?
Yes, they move the target. So they will turn around and face you. So if you think of relationships as two people facing each other, that's intimacy. That's a secure attachment. Okay, so the fearful avoidant will turn and run. All right, the dismissive avoidant is always running, but the fearful avoidant will then turn around and then they'll even move towards. But then they freak out and then they turn and they go again. And so
why do they do that? Why do the fearful avoidants do that?
Because they're trying to be brave. Usually from their childhood, they did have some safety. So it's not that all parents are bad, but the parents are the easiest example to use. So I'm just going to use parents for this one. If you have a mother who sometimes shows up for you, she's sometimes safe, she's sometimes nurturing, she sometimes will give you positive words of affirmation or healthy physical touch. Okay, you've had some experiences with safety. But then if that same mother very often, not that it can't happen sometimes, because it can, freaks out at the child, screams and yells at the child, is neglectful for the child, completely shuts the child out, then that teaches the child that back and forth motion. The dismissive avoidant, in my opinion, clinically, that to me is really, really sad because that tells me that that person primarily had no one and no one's safe.
And would it be safe to say the dismissive avoidant just automatically assumes I'm never going to get it right? You're always going to be mad. It's always never going to be enough. And the fearful avoidant is like, oh, maybe I'm doing this right. Nope, failed again. Oh, perhaps there's light at the tunnel. Nope, failed again. Is that an accurate depiction of what it would be like?
Right. They still will put themselves out there, and they still have a conscious awareness that they really do want closeness and intimacy in a relationship. And so they will go out and test the waters, but they can still have the same hypersensitivity to rejection, disapproval, criticism. Feeling not enough is the dismissive avoidant.
But don't we all struggle with that? And maybe that's why it makes it a little bit more complicated to help the dismissive avoidant, because we all can struggle with, I messed that up, or, oh, I'm going to blow it, right? Especially when you're dealing with infidelity or addiction or compulsive sexual behaviors and trying to save your relationship.
Right. So we look at it on a spectrum. I mean, people are human. So to a certain degree, Michael Crocker out of New York City is the one who taught me the most about attachment. We don't want to be taxonomical about any of it. I can show up and be secure. And then something can happen and maybe I act anxious or I act dismissive or I act disorganized. It's what is the overall. So just like they say with parenting, you don't have to have a perfect mother to form a secure attachment with your child in childhood so that they grow up and they can have a secure attachment. They can take some hits. That's resiliency. But if you have somebody who primarily, like 80%, 90%, they are primarily in one of these three dysfunctional attachments, that's someone who has had significant wounding.
So let me ask you this on behalf of all the betrayeds that would sit back and say, well, wait a minute, this all sounds great, but my husband or my wife was seemingly pretty attached with their affair partner or affair partners. They didn't seem to have a struggle going towards them. They were going towards them. Some of them might even say, my unfaithful was chasing their betray or their affair partner. They were constantly moving towards them. They were constantly. So wait a minute. So it sounds like, and I'm not saying that you're saying this, but isn't it easy? You're a formerly betrayed partner. Isn't it easy for the betrayed to go, oh, so it's my fault? So I wasn't caring for them or soothing them. And obviously I'm taking it to the extreme, but it could be very easy for the betrayed to be like, so wait a minute, I'm supposed to change their diapers and attachment styles here? This is my fault? What's your thoughts on that?
So we don't both get in trouble. I first will say that this does not apply to every situation of infidelity. Sometimes there are situations, and people don't like to hear this, but it doesn't mean that it's your situation. It wasn't mine. But in some situations, we can say infidelity is an act of self-preservation. I am not talking about those cases, and I would say those are the minority. The majority of the cases that we see with infidelity is that overt being true, covert being true. Both people in the marriage have unresolved attachment issues at a pathological level. That doesn't mean they can't be healed. So I don't use pathology as a dirty word at all. So the unfaithful spouse is going outside of the relationship to chase pseudo-intimacy. Esther Perel says it. You don't know if it's real intimacy unless it's not an affair. The affair in and of itself is safe because you're never all in. You don't have to be in. And usually there's a lot of putting up with a lot of crap that in a normal relationships where you know it's just you two, that's not going to fly.
So we as unfaithful might overlook the negatives in the affair partner. We hide them, we suppress them, we don't focus on them because we're just trying to feel good. We're just trying to escape. We're just trying to experience synthetic intimacy. Is that fair?
The affair partner knows that they are not with somebody who is to death do us part. So it's easier to say to an affair partner, well, I don't like when you do this, so bye. So you have more power. In a marriage, if you know it's till death do us part, there are no outside parties. I mean, you are faced with having knockdown dragouts until you figure it out, or, living in complete misery. But with an affair partner, there's so much power where it's like, oh, I don't like what you're doing, so I'm going to leave you. And then what happens? Usually that affair partner scrambles to try and make an adjustment, or because they don't want to lose.
Right. So it's really, you've done a fantastic job of explaining the mind of both the unfaithful, who is dismissive avoidant, as well as fearful avoidant. And it's really a lot for the betrayeds to have to wrestle with, right? I mean, it's an enormous amount of behavior for them to try and dissect and translate, right?
Right. And already on top of just the betrayal trauma, then having to slice and dice the attachment issues that your unfaithful partner has, it's a lot. But as an unfaithful partner that you are really loved if you have a betrayed spouse who is not quitting. It might not be rainbows and butterflies, but they're not quitting. They're going to session. They're reading recovery literature. They're trying. Then that is real love. That's the huge difference between infidelity or affairs and when an unfaithful gets caught and they have a spouse who's like, oh my gosh, you just destroyed me and part of me hates your guts and wants to burn the house down with you in it. But I love you and I want to work to try to reconcile this and understand and learn about you and what brought you into your own attachment dysfunction. I want to be part of your healing.
So that you make a great point. Okay. Infidelity comes out. Now we have an unfaithful to start with who's dismissive avoidant, but yet wants to save their marriage, but yet they're betrayed is off the rails. I mean, why would they not be, right? They've just found out that their partner's been living in some double life for months or years. And the betrayed is like, look, I'm living with a crazy person. I'm trying to lean in and do work, but then this dismissive avoidant is running the other way and is constantly feeling attacked or irritated when I just want to talk about this. What is that betrayed in this situation to do?
Take a deep breath first. You have to make sure that you have the right kind of help for your dismissive avoidant. If you are working with a clinician that the dismissive avoidant hates, you will never make progress. So you cannot strong arm a dismissive avoidant. You will lose. You have to be working with a clinician that knows, and you actually are extremely good at this, knows how to build rapport with that dismissive avoidant who really deep down is a really, really scared person. And they're terrified of really being shown for who they are and being told that they are never going to be enough and they should, just.
Okay, hold on. So even though they present themselves like an ass, male or female, they're really just scared and terrified. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, a dismissive avoidant is an anxious attacher at their core.
Because they're afraid of being rejected, shamed, demeaned, which is what happened to them when they were young.
Right. So they start out anxious, right? You start out trying to make the relationship work. So it's that child who keeps trying to engage with the parent.
Okay.
And then eventually they're done. And so the protection is, I'm done. I don't need people. I don't need relationships. Goodbye. The anxious attacher that presents anxious in adulthood, they couldn't develop that skill per se.
Okay. So now we move to the fearful avoidant. And the betrayed is sitting here going hot and cold. You want it, you don't want it. Like, it's not the right time, it is the right time. You love bomb me and you come towards me and then you put on your running shoes and sprint away from me. What does the betrayed do in that situation?
Things that I say that make me unpopular. They should be thankful that they are being pursued at all. So they tell themselves that, oh my gosh, they're with this affair partner. That's where they had real intimacy. That's what they really want to be doing. No, it's in this situation, it's usually a very chicken move. the only way that the fearful avoidant or the dismissive avoidant can get some kind of intimacy is to do it through an affair. If you have your unfaithful partner who is acting out in disorganized or fearful avoidant ways, that shows me that they are trying to actually cultivate real intimacy. That tells me that they really love their betrayed spouse.
So what do you tell them then in order to be more consistent and to move forward and to actually stop coming and running and pursuing and then turning tail? How do you help them prolong their pursuit of their betrayed as well as their own recovery?
So working with the betrayed to help them understand, what does a disorganized attacher need? And it can be so difficult. And I have a lot of compassion for both. But in this situation, when I'm talking about the betrayed spouse, I have compassion if the betrayed spouse struggles with containment, if the betrayed spouse is a highly anxious attacher, because what the disorganized or fearful avoidant attacher needs is calm consistency. So this is where the disorganized attachment happens. When a child is little, you've seen that stage where the toddler comes and sits on the mom's lap, and then the toddler runs away. And then the toddler comes back and sits on the mom's lap, and then it runs a little bit farther away. Okay, you build secure attachment. How? What is the mother doing?
She's
Nothing.
accepting. She's supporting and accepting, right?
She's doing nothing. She's being consistent. She's calm. She doesn't freak out when the toddler runs away. She doesn't freak out when the toddler comes. She's there. She's nurturing. She's reassuring. And then she lets him go. How hard is that for a betrayed spouse to learn?
Right. So that would then put the onus on, if the unfaithful struggles, in this case with fearful avoidant, they better damn well be doing their work if they want their betrayed to be patient with their back and forth, coming and going, mood swing type behavior, right? Because if the unfaithful is going to resort to that, then they have to be massively patient with what the betrayed is dealing with, which is rage, betrayal, anger, reminders, triggers, intrusive thoughts, trauma, complex PTSD, right? I mean, isn't there a mutual patience for what each other's dealing with?
Mutual chaos was what was coming to mind for me. So yes, the unfaithful spouse has to learn to reframe if they approach the betrayed, and a betrayed has a betrayal trauma response. Okay, well then that's going to trigger their disorganized attachment, and they're going to yank back, right? And then I could say to them, no, get up, get up. Her response was normal. You have to get up, be brave, and go back in. Go. And I shove them back in. Try it again. They have to learn resiliency. They have to learn ego strength. They have to learn to see under the iceberg of their betrayed spouse, and to not always need to use their betrayed spouse is their secure base.
Fascinating.
Now, it can also help the betrayed spouse if the disorganized attacher, the unfaithful, develops a lot of introspection. If they can come back and say, I'm so sorry, I just put my running shoes on and ran from you. I know that was disorganized attachment. I know that's so frustrating. On top of the betrayal trauma, that goes such a long way to just acknowledge that.
So self-awareness to how difficult they can be to read.
And it's intimacy. That is intimacy. For a disorganized attacher to say, yep, okay, I see it. I just pulled a disorganized move on you. I just did a fearful avoidant move on you. At least then the betrayed spouse feels seen. They feel heard. They feel validated. That gives them energy to keep fighting. And this is intimacy. This closes the gap slowly.
So you're asking the unfaithful to be vulnerable as best they can with what they're feeling, because Gabor Mate says we have two choices: victimhood or vulnerability. So if the unfaithful chooses victimhood, you're never happy. I'm such a screw up. I keep disappointing you. You should just go be with somebody else. There's no hope for me, blah, 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 victimhood. But if we would choose vulnerability, like, hey, I'm really trying to do what my therapist Amanda said I should do. I just see how I ran away and I got avoidant and I got really snarky, and I'm trying to apologize. I don't even know how to apologize, but I'm sorry. I'm a jerk. I'm dumb. I'm something, but I'm really trying. If they can choose vulnerability, it makes it at least a little bit easier for the betrayed. Is that what you're saying?
A lot easier. And I can always say to the betrayed, I promise you, they were not doing this for their affair partner. The affair partner in these situations is just the disorganized attachment at its highest level. Think about it. They go from the affair partner to the spouse. Dink, 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 dink. That's disorganized attachment in that situation. So if they're staying put, okay, they may run away, but who are they running to? They're either going to go sleep on the couch, they're going to come into session with me, which is safe, right? They're going to go to some safe people, maybe that we put them in group in. They're going to listen to podcasts. We're teaching them how to self-soothe, and then they're going to come back. So they're pendulating. And that can help the betrayed spouse feel that they are really loved. Like this is a side of their partner that no one has seen, not even them up until this point. Because they're hiding.
Okay. You just said it. That was brilliant. So, and I could understand that the viewer, the listener might say, Sam, you're trying to make it easier on the unfaithful. No, I'm not. But you just said something that's really remarkable, that this is a side to them that the affair partner never saw. What does that mean? Because now I really want to take a time out and tell you betrayeds, I mean this with all my heart. I am not trying to make an excuse for the unfaithful. I am not trying to soften the blow. I'm trying to find a diamond in the middle of words I won't use on the podcast. I'm trying to find some light in the middle of probably the darkest tunnel you may have ever gone through. And Amanda, you're saying that this is a side that even their affair partner has not seen. What does that mean?
It means that, generally speaking, when you're dealing with infidelity and affairs, what is the unfaithful spouse going to the affair partner for? To be the hero.
Right.
To be perfect.
To escape. To
have
medicate.
All affirmation, right? They don't want any reality. They don't want any responsibilities.
Right.
So that's not real. That's not real life. That's not real love. That's why Esther Perel says you don't know if an affair is real until it's not an affair. So if your unfaithful spouse is choosing to do the work with you, then who do they love? They're in session with us. Chances are they love their spouse. They don't really ever make it to us. They leave for the affair partner.
So they're doing this work. It would then be appropriate to say, at one level, betrayed, listen, they are staying in the fight. They're doing work. They're laboring. But then in another sense, there's a part where we would say to the unfaithful, I guess the best words, a famed clinician who's still alive, Rick Reynolds, a great friend of both of us. I guess this is a time when I would share a statement that he said to me probably almost 2 decades ago. I'm trying not to laugh if I say it, but I remember he looked at me and he said, Sam, have you considered the possibility of how freaking hard it is to live with you and how difficult you might be? And I remember at that moment, no one had said that to me that I could really remember. And I remembered at that point feeling very, very small. But then as I thought about it and really kind of meditated on it, I realized he could have said it 75 times worse than he did, but chose to be very kind and compassionate with me. So is it equally true then that you would say to your, I think that the betrays are sitting back, and we're almost done here, but I think the betrays are sitting back and going, well, okay, if you're such a specialist, what are you telling these unfaithful? Are you telling them how much of a complete jerk face they can be? Or are you just coddling them and telling them, because here's some of the feedback that James and I get from Ask the Unfaithful is sometimes people say, oh, you're just talking about childhood. You're not being hardliner. You're not being straight. You're not really giving them the cold, hard truth. So behind the scenes, when you have an unfaithful, male or female, are you just coddling them? I know that you're not, but these people that are watching and listening, the audience, they don't know this, but how do you deal with them?
It definitely doesn't seem to be my reputation that I do enough coddling. So authoritarian versus authoritative, that's where this is rooted in. Authoritarian back to parenting, because really this is all about reparenting. Authoritarian is only kick their ass, right? You kick your kid's ass, even if you need to shame the hell out of them. That's a style of parenting. Okay. Then along comes authoritative, which we still kick our clients' butts, but I also nurture them. And that's what Rick taught me too. He could make me feel 100% accepted and safe and cared for and completely hold me accountable rigorously. So that's what I do. And that's what the clinician has to do that with the avoidant, the unfaithful, and then hope that the betrayed spouse can come along to learn that same skill. Yes, I'm going to hold you accountable, and I'm going to tell you that I love you. You're driving me crazy, and I'm not leaving. I am all in. So it's both the nurture and the accountability. That's the difference between authoritarian and authoritative styles of communication. You build secure attachment with authoritative.
I think this is a fascinating discussion that helps get into the whys. Why do we unfaithful do what we do? Why do the betrayed respond the way that they respond? And as we say goodbye today, for those of you that are watching and listening, one size does not fit all. One approach does not fit all. There are so many nuances to caring for those who are dealing with infidelity and addiction. What works for one attachment style is probably not going to work seamlessly for the other attachment style. As Amanda alluded to, that's why you absolutely need to be working with an expert who's been through infidelity, who understands it, and that can be compassionate and kind, but yet direct, and to create a sense of accountability. So, Amanda, I want to give you just one more minute. I mean, if you were to be watching this 15, 20 years ago, if you were a betrayed in this instance, and I know when you first found out, you were outside your mind, but for those that are sitting here going, what do I do? What are some things that a betrayed can do today? What are some things you are very action oriented? It's one of the feedback it's one of the metrics that I hear from people all the time is that, man, she gave me homework. She told me things to do. I didn't just sit there and just kind of feel my feelings, but she gave me things to do. What are just a couple of things that a betrayed can do right now to gain more clarity?
So, 15 years ago, you look for expert help. That's the first thing you can do, is try to think in terms of, how do I build my expert team? And then how do I build healthy self-care so that I can really lean into my expert team and do the gut-wrenching work that is required of someone who is trying to heal after infidelity?
And I think that, we've told a lot of stories today. We've joked a little bit, not with any intent to disrespect the journey that you are on, whether you're unfaithful or betrayed, but it does get easier. It's not as hopeless as it might seem, and you will get your life back. It just might look a little bit differently. And if I can help, you can reach out to me at samshealingpodcast@gmail.com. And Amanda, if people want to see about working with you or reading or watching videos by you, how do they reach you?
My email address is amanda@healingaffairscounseling.com. And my YouTube channel is Amanda Asproni.
Okay, everybody. I know that you were probably as captivated as I was by the information from a true expert. And when you're dealing with infidelity, you've got to work with an expert. Once again, thank you for joining me. And again, Amanda, thank you for coming into the podcast. And we'll see you next time on Sam's Healing Podcast.
Bye.